This is called Japanese mustard spinach. And I'm not really a mustard person. People love mustard greens. I'm not one of them. I don't eat the tops of radishes. I don't even really like radishes that much. Not a big fan of things that have that spicy bite. But I tried this. I was at a Asian grocery store in Seattle, and they had a seed rack. And boy, was that fun. Because they had all these things that I had never seen. And I bought this because they called it mustard spinach. And I thought, maybe that's different. Because mustard is a great green in the spring. It's super easy to grow. It grows really fast. It likes cool weather. And I would love to find a variety of mustard that I actually liked to eat. And so I tried this, and it's actually quite good. And it is a lot more mild than most mustards. I wouldn't say it tastes like spinach, but it's pretty darn mild. So it's true to its name. Comes up very easily. I've saved seed from it. For whatever reason, it does not set a lot of seed. And I haven't had great germination, so it's not an easy thing to seed save from, which is too bad, because that would be nice to be able to do that. But really, I'll put the name and the seed company on the screen. What I'm doing here is I'm just stripping off the big, tough stems. That's what I'm looking for when it just comes off like that. I do the same thing if I'm ever processing kale. You guys will see me do kale at some point, I'm sure. Basically, the less tender part comes off and the more tender part stays. And so it just makes it really easy to, instead of cutting it with a knife and fiddling with it, which would be maddening. Some of these are really tender, and so they're not stripping as easily. But this was planted about the same time as the pak choi that I have in a different video. So about 45 days, I would say, from seed to harvest. It can get quite tall. As you can see, these leaves are easily the length of my forearm. So a good 2 to 3 feet. And it can fall over pretty easily, and so sometimes you have to stake it a bit. But it's a really nice green in the spring that's different from spinach. I have a feeling if I figured out which side I was working from, I would probably have better luck here. I feel like one side strips easier than the other, and I'm not paying attention to which side I'm stripping from. And I've already rinsed this a bit, so it doesn't really need much. And it was pretty darn clean, even coming out of the garden. You can see there's no real dirt on it. So this doesn't need much attention. That's not gonna fit. We're gonna have to find a different place for that. Oh, I missed one. I know this seems like a huge amount of greens, but you'll be amazed how low it cooks, how much it cooks down. And I'm just chunking these up. I don't mind if they're not cut up really fine. And depending on how you like it, you can actually use an immersion blender or a stick blender to puree this, or a regular blender, or a food processor for that matter, to puree this into a really smooth mix at the end of cooking if you wanted to. So chunky is fine as long as it's chopped up enough that it's not going to take up a ton of room. Hey everybody, today we are making Indian greens. You will sometimes see this as saag on a menu in an Indian restaurant, or palak, depending on whether it's made with spinach or with mustard greens. In my case, we are going to mix some Japanese mustard greens, some kale, and some spinach all together. So we're just going to call it Indian spiced greens. This is a great way to use up lots of greens, and it's probably the first way that I actually learned to really enjoy eating greens. I'm not somebody who can I am now, but I didn't used to be somebody who could just eat a plate of sauteed greens. That was absolutely bizarre to me that people did that when I was a kid. I couldn't understand it, and definitely didn't want to eat it. And I was in a Indian restaurant and had some saag, and it was probably drowning in ghee and cream, and it was really, really good, and I've loved it ever since. And so back in the day before everything was Googleable, but there was still internet, I found a recipe. And then many years later, Cooks Illustrated or America's Test Kitchen did a recipe, and I finally have come to learn that it's really just not all that complicated, and I can kind of make it what I want it to be. So this is sort of an amalgamation of several different recipes based on what I like, and also based on calorie content. This is an amazing recipe when it's made with like heavy cream, but I don't need that in my waistline. So we're going to use a little bit of yogurt at the end to cream it up. So to start, you want to brown some onions in a pot. And one of the biggest keys to any kind of Indian cooking is they almost always brown their onions really well, like 10 or 15 minutes. It is not a quick saute. And that is some of where that really deep, roasty flavor in Indian cooking comes from. So I am using ghee, also just basically known as clarified butter. I make this myself. There are 1,000 recipes on the internet for how to do this. You basically melt a pound of butter in a small pot under low heat, and it will bubble quite a bit as the water that's naturally in that butter. I think butter is like 75%, 80% fat, and the other 20% is water. Basically, all that water will slowly boil off, and then your butter will start to brown. The milk solids sink to the bottom of the pan and start to brown. That's when you really start needing to watch it. And so you watch it. You don't have to watch it so close. I've been known to throw a pound of butter in a pot and go take a shower. But as that water boils off, the bubbles get smaller and smaller, and you can burn that milk fat really quickly. And so you have to watch it. Once it's done pretty much bubbling, before that milk fat that's sunk to the bottom starts to burn, you turn it off, strain it through a cheesecloth, and you have ghee, which is clarified butter. And it is shelf stable at room temperature. It does not go bad. I'm sure it would eventually, but certainly not in the time that I use it. And it doesn't burn in the pan when you want to saute vegetables in it, or fish, or something that you want to use butter, but you don't want it to burn. So since we like that buttery flavor on this, but we also are going to brown these onions for 10 or 15 minutes. Having ghee is a good choice. If you didn't want to go to all that trouble, it's quite expensive to buy in the store, which is why I make my own, because I can watch for butter to go on sale and just make my own. You could just use any kind of neutral oil here, from canola to grapeseed to whatever you like, whatever your dietary and personal taste dictate. I personally have recently switched over to grapeseed oil. So we are going to get these going. And the trick here is you want enough heat that they're going to saute and get some brown, but not so much heat that you're going to burn the heck out of them. So I usually start out at a fairly warm heat, and then as they start to cook down, I'll turn that heat down. If they do start to burn, you can throw in a tablespoon of water just to cool that pan off and give them a chance to catch up. But we want these to be nicely brown, so I will come back in a couple of minutes when they are further along, and we'll see how we're doing. All right, checking in. You can see we've got a little color here. I turned my heat way down because this has only been on about 4 minutes, and we're clearly getting quite a bit of browning here. We're trying to caramelize these, so we need to not just have the outsides brown and the insides not brown. We need to brown the whole thing. The other thing I realized is I could probably use a good pinch of salt in here. So don't forget the salt. It helps draw out the moisture from the onions, and so it speeds the cooking time. All right, we'll give that a little more time with the heat really low. And see where we are. So here's what our onions look like after 8 minutes. I probably had the heat a little bit too high at the beginning, so there's a little bit of char in there, but I think it's fine. I don't think it's burnt, and it's going to add nice flavor. I'm going to give this 4 more minutes. Let's see where we end up. All right. So this is after 12 minutes. And you can see we are definitely beyond a normal onion saute here. But nothing's burnt, no black. Now we're ready for everything else. So this original recipe calls for fresh ginger and fresh garlic and a chopped serrano chili. I'm kind of doing the easy weeknight version here. This is a great quick product, very tasty if you really hate messing with ginger. So a tablespoon of ginger. This is one of my garlic bombs. So this is the equivalent of 3 or 4 cloves of roasted garlic. And then this is basically my own homemade chili paste that has garlic and red pepper or serrano peppers in it that I make in the fall or in the late summer when serranos are ripe. And I'm just going to throw some of that in there. So that is the equivalent of our ginger, garlic, and chili. I'm going to give that a quick stir just to wake everything up. Make sure that garlic gets broken up a bit. It's already been pureed, so it's pretty loose, but I don't want it to be one big clump. Yum. Then we're going to add our spices. And that is some ground cumin, some ground coriander. It was a teaspoon of cumin, 2 teaspoons of coriander, half a teaspoon of gram masala. Gram masala is a little bit like a curry powder in that it's actually a mix of a bunch of different things. I make my own. There's a bunch of recipes online. I've tried a bunch of them. It usually has black pepper. It usually has a little bit of cinnamon. They vary quite a bit. This one happens to be from Kenji Lopez Alt. It was the last one I saw, and I thought I'd try it. But all of those spices are going in, and I'm putting them specifically in this dry pan because I want to toast them a little bit. And this is a great trick. This is also really good if you're making chili. So like kind of, bean chili. If you toast your spices a little bit before you add any liquid, it brings out their flavor because all those volatile oils that are in there kind of wake up. So we're just gonna mix all that together until it starts smelling amazing before we start adding our greens in. So we're building layers of flavor here. My heat was really low, so I'm gonna warm that up just a little bit. And usually 30 seconds to a minute is all you need in terms of blooming some spices in some oil. The oil is also kind of critical because a lot of those volatile compounds that are in there are oil soluble. And so instead of just flashing off, it helps them stick around. All right, so that's that. And now we're gonna start adding giant handfuls of greens. And you're looking at this and you're like, there's no way that's gonna fit. Trust me, it will fit. It's just gonna take a bit. And these will wilt down pretty quickly when they hit that heat. Remember, this is kale, spinach, and a type of mustard green called Japanese mustard spinach. I'm going to add just a titch of water to make sure that the bottom of that pan doesn't burn before things start breaking down. Also going to kind of deglaze some of that lovely onion that we got going down there. And the kale probably takes the longest to break down. It was the one that was on top, so those leaves are a little more sturdy. But you can see it's already shrinking down. All right, next handful. And recipes for this vary, but they always have ginger, garlic, some kind of chili, cumin, coriander. Those are all really standard. And then from there, sometimes some cayenne, sometimes some garam masala, sometimes tomato. I am going to add a little tomato to this just because I happen to have a half a jar of tomato sauce that I could use up. You can leave it out or put it in, depending on your tastes and what you're cleaning out of your fridge. The Cook's Illustrated recipe I have calls for cinnamon and cardamom. I'm not a huge fan of baking spices in savory dishes. My husband really isn't a fan of that. And the garam masala has a little bit of cinnamon in it. And so I am following more of a different recipe rather than the Cook's Illustrated recipe when it comes to that part. You can see how fast that's cooking down. All right, next handful. We're getting close. And I don't know the weight. I didn't weigh what I did here, but I would say at least a pound of greens and probably up to 2 pounds of greens, depending on what you've got on hand, what you're trying to use up, how much you love it. And there's a lot of this was rinsed, so there's going to be a little bit of moisture on the greens themselves, just from being rinsed, because I didn't try to dry them. And that's also going to help them warm up and steam and break down. trying to put the hot stuff on the bottom over to the top so that it helps wilt everything. Go for a minute. So this is just homemade tomato sauce, and I don't remember exactly. I was following a tested recipe, but I'm sure it's just mostly homegrown tomatoes cooked down by about 50%. So it's probably got a little salt in it. That's probably all that's in there. So very simple. It's not gonna add any crazy flavors. I'm gonna pick this stem out. I'm guessing we could use another good pinch of salt. Look at that. Can you believe how much that cooked down? And there's a few stems in there that are probably not going to be super tasty. I'm sure these would cook down. I'm just, because they're presenting themselves to me, I'm going to take them out. All right. So now I'm going to add in this because of all the labor that goes into canning tomatoes. I tend to rinse the jars because I literally don't want to waste any of it because I know how much work it took. If you had it, you could just throw a chopped up fresh tomato in here. You could also use, obviously, canned tomatoes from the store, or you could just leave it out. I see that typically when you're seeing a recipe for spinach, Indian greens, they tend to have tomato. If you're seeing ones for mustard, often they don't. I was just looking at some recipes earlier, but I like the taste of tomato. I think it adds a nice touch. So I just leave it in, or add it in. All right. I'm going to put a lid on that, let it simmer for about 5 minutes, and then we'll come back. All right, let's see how we're doing here. This has been cooking for a little over 5 minutes. And really, with greens, they get tender really quickly. You don't have to cook the heck out of them. Now you could serve this just like this and stir in a little bit of cream or a little bit of yogurt. You could also, the classic way of serving this is called Palak Paneer, and paneer is an Indian cheese that there are recipes all over online to make it. It's very easy to make. It's a fresh cheese, and that is usually put in a block and then sauteed and then stirred into this dish. So that's the classic way that you see it in a lot of Indian restaurants. It's very good. You could also use tofu instead of cheese and just saute up and brown some tofu chunks and then throw it in here, and you'd have a really lovely complete meal. I personally love this with chicken, and so I am going to do an Indian chicken and serve it alongside this. But I'm also going to blend this a little bit because I want it a little less chunky, but again, you could leave it chunky if you wanted to. This is going to be messy. Not ideal, but I really hate putting hot things in my blender because it's even more messy than this is. So I'm just gonna do it with my stick blender. And see, that's already looking a lot more. I think what I need to do here is this. And I leave a little bit of chunk. I don't want it to be perfectly smooth. You do you. Whatever level you like it, stop there. That looks pretty good. Now if I can just get the greens out of the stick blender. There we go. It doesn't look like much, but it sure tastes amazing. All right. Let's see if this needs a little more heat or a little more salt. That is quite lovely. Maybe just a titch more salt. And then I like to stir in a little bit of yogurt. I think the recipe I have calls for half a cup. You believe that? All those greens, and really it's like 4 servings. 2 if you're really hungry. Better. Actually, honestly, that looks like about a half a cup. I think I'm just going to throw it in there. I love rubber spatulas. It's like that and a wooden spoon. How would I survive without either one? So full-fat yogurt, low-fat yogurt, Greek yogurt, unflavored yogurt for sure. Don't accidentally put vanilla in here. That would not be good. I'm going to turn my heat off. And again, this is probably not going to look super appealing, but that little bit of creaminess with that dairy is really just going to be amazing. Beautiful. There you go. Spicy Indian greens. A great way to get nutrition and flavor. Yum.